Good afternoon. Afternoon, guys. So it's always the curse for me that the talk is always after lunch. I think I've done close to 100 talks. 96 of them have always been after lunch. I think the role continues. So good afternoon, everybody. So welcome to the talk. Honey, I just put the hospital on ventilator. Rakesh and I are going to take you for a very interesting ride for the next 30 minutes. Sit back and have some fun. So that's me. I'm a huge Batman fan. And that's my book. I co-authored a book called It's Your Digital Life. You can check it on Amazon. This is a shameless marketing, but I still don't care. But you can still see that. And I predominantly work on document and PDF-based malwares and memory forensics expert. So that's me. I have 14 years of industry experience. And that's about me. I've done 2 TED Talks also. Check that out. Let's get to the chase. I mean, if you're not probably from the medical industry, everything probably looks the same to you, right? Like in the picture that you see there. Radiology, computed tomography, which is actually a CT scan, and MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, which is an MRI, and ultrasound, technically all looks the same. I'll tell you why. Some days, probably years before, you would probably go to a hospital, get a scan done. And then there used to be a small thin film of paper, which used to be black and white, and they used to mark something, put it on a white screen like this and say, congratulations, you've just blown your lung, or something probably is not working for sure, right? But however, those things were put in a file, and they were writing your name, date of birth, and a bunch of other details. This was the manual side of things, how things worked. Now, welcome to the digital era. Things have to, get digital. Now, what if we embed all of these metadata into something digital and we need to pass it around? Well, congratulations. You added something digitized to that aspect. So how we are going to cover this whole section is into 3 things. One being file type, storage, and preview. I'll tell you why. File type, it can be a CT scan, it can be an MRI scan, it can be an X-ray scan. Now, if I do that digitally, I have to store it somewhere, correct? And if I have to store it somewhere, I have to move it around somewhere. And if I have to move it around somewhere, I have to view it somewhere, right? Now, that is what we call it as DICOM, okay? Now, DICOM is the standard format that allows you to view these type of medical images in a sense and embed all these metadata that we are talking about and push it digitally. So that's what Rakesh will probably come and talk later about the internals of things. But it's a fair bit amount of introduction. Now, how many of you watched G.I. Joe in the past? Sorry, I come from a very old school background. Okay. I absolutely don't know what G.I. Joe means, but I know actually what DICOM means. Okay? Digital imaging and communications in medicine. Now, whatever I told you, right? The scan from an X-ray, or it's probably coming from a CT scan, all of these details along with the patient data goes into it. It could also contain equipment procedures, where it is coming from, which machine, who scanned it, date and time, and a lot of meaningful and non-meaningful information. Now, we have the digitized format, but we have to move it around, right? Well, congratulations, you have something called as PACS. Picture Archiving and Communication System that allows you to move these files like your HTTP GET POST methods, right? You have to send a file, receive a file, send a packet. Similarly, there are protocols that allows you to send. If you see something called as modality there, which talks about that that's a CT scan, that's an X-ray machine, an MRI machine. Those scanned images move around to the centralized database or this communication system using the protocols like store, move, and all these things. I'm not jumping detail into it, but I'm just giving you enough background because juicy things are actually coming in. Okay? Cool. Now, when I have it, I need something to view it. Now, how am I going to view it? Which is actually called as a DICOM reader. So, I use a DICOM reader to open these X-ray images. Instead of going back to the whiteboard, if you observe, you go to a hospital, you'll see the doctor getting everything on his desktop, right? Once the scan is done, it automatically comes to him. DICOM viewer helps you to view these things. Now hold on to your horses. Keep this in your mind. This is one of my key attack vectors that I'm probably going to talk later half. But I'm going to pass it on to Rakesh to talk more about DICOMs and its internals before we jump into the attack. Okay, over to you, Rakesh.
Thank you so much, Shyam. Before I move ahead and explain you the internals of DICOM and also how you can hack DICOM files, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Rakesh Mahanthi. I finished my bachelor's in computer science and engineering from NIT Tiruchirappalli, and I graduated from there in 2020. I'm currently working with GE Healthcare as an Edison Engineering Development Program member, and I also am a product security analyst with the cybersecurity team at GE Healthcare. I love playing cricket and badminton, and I practice meditation. So moving ahead, do you guys know what exactly happens when you go to a hospital and go through a scan or a procedure? So let's say there is a patient called Nullcon. He went to a hospital and the doctor has suggested him to go for an X-ray and an ultrasound scan. So these two scan types are called studies in the medical terminology. Let's say this patient Nullcon has went into the X-ray room and he sat for the scan number 1 and he got a image of the particular scan. But there is a slight distortion at certain areas and the radiologist wanted a rerun of the scan. So he went for the scan number 2 and he got another picture of a certain organ. So these two scans, scan number 1 and scan number 2, are called series in the medical terminology, and the images are called instances. So each of these, whatever hierarchy you see, each of it has a certain ID assigned to it. And also when it comes to the patient information, it's not just the name. All the patient specific information, or the PII, personally identifiable information, goes into the patient section of this DICOM hierarchy. And the interesting part is all this information is going into a given DICOM file. So just imagine how much sensitive information is being stored in a given DICOM file. So it's pretty important to secure the DICOM files in a given hospital network. But unfortunately, due to a certain glitch in the structure of DICOM files, there is a chance to embed malicious stuff into the DICOM files and make it look like a legitimate DICOM, but on the background it is a malicious executable. So that mainly arises to the glitch in the design of the DICOM format. So we'll just quickly run through the details of how DICOM looks when you open it and see it in detail. So DICOM basically has two parts, the header part and the metadata part. So when it comes to the header part, it has 128-byte preamble, which is usually left empty. After that, from byte number 129 to 133, the next 4 bytes has something called magic number. So whatever image formats you take, each of them have certain magic number associated with it. In a similar way, DICOMs also have a magic number called DICM from 129 to 133rd byte. So this is the header section. Now let's move on to the metadata section. So metadata mainly consists of 3 things. One is private tags, second is public tags, and third one is the pixel data. So all this data is stored in the form of dictionary. So there is a key, a 32-bit key, and a value associated with it, right? So all the odd number, all the even number namespace is reserved for public tags. In the sense like all the tags in the even number namespace have a certain meaning associated with it. For example, if you take 00100010 tag, it is meant to be patient name. You can't change the meaning to the tag. So in the sense like all these public tags have a certain meaning associated with it. Cool? Now moving on, there is pixel data which usually goes into a standard tag called 7FE00010. But there is another set of tags called private tags. So these private tags were provided in order to give the hospitals freedom to add their own custom tags. With freedom comes responsibility, and if someone isn't responsible, there'll be chaos all around. So now if you observe, there are 2 interesting sections in a given DICOM file. First one is the 128-byte preamble, which is intentionally left empty. Usually if you take any file formats, it starts with magic byte and goes on, right? But why is that 128-byte left empty? Second one is the privilege of adding your custom tags as private tags in DICOM. So these 2 are the major things which can be exploited to make a DICOM a malicious one. So let's move on. Let us first try to answer the question why 128-byte has been intentionally left empty. So previously, when the DICOM standard has not come into picture, there were other file formats which were very prevalent in the healthcare industry, like tagged information file format, TIFF, JPEG, JPG, and all these things. So DICOM standard wanted to onboard all these other file formats into DICOM format in a smooth way. In the sense, like, let's say your hospital is depending on TIFF files in the pathology section, and you want to convert those TIFF files into DICOM files. What you can do is, like, you can add the TIFF file header in the 128 byte section which was intentionally left empty, and create a pixel pointer to the location where the pixel data is sitting. You got the point, right? Why the 128 byte has been intentionally left empty. So that's the reason. So let's move on. Now the real challenge, hacking the DICOM files. So Cyril Labs has worked on a POC on how these DICOM files are vulnerable, but they have intentionally not made the source code public, stating ethical concerns. So, but as a healthcare company, we have the responsibility to safeguard all the DICOM files which are coming into our hospital network, right? So in order to find a solution to a problem, we should first think from the attacker's perspective and create the problem and understand what is the cause for the problem. So what I did was, like, I tried to write a Python script from scratch, which takes in a malicious exe, a legitimate DICOM, and produces a malicious DICOM, which produces a file which acts both like a legitimate DICOM as well as a malicious exe. So let's move on to the demo quickly. It hasn't come up there.
Yep.
Sorry guys, once.
Works?
Yeah.
Okay, we're just going to start it from first.
Cool. Cool, yeah. So this is a script which I wrote. I've named it Evil DICOM. So I've, can you play it? I'll control. So I've created a folder with all the test files. The nullcon.cpp is a simple C++ program which just prints out a certain string just for the sake of demo. You can have any other program over there. I've compiled it and created an exe. It's nullcon exe. And I also have a test DICOM which we are going to infiltrate into. Okay. So now, as you can see, nullcon.exe is an exe. If you try to execute it, something happens behind. And test DICOM is an ECG data. It will come up on screen. So I opened it on a industry standard Radiant DICOM viewer. So as you can see, this is a legitimate DICOM, and I also have an exe which I'm going to embed soon. Yeah, moving on. This is the script. I'll just quickly take you through. So it is completely modularized. It's not as easy as you see it, because I have to work at a byte level to create everything. So I chose the tag, it will come up, wait. So I chose the tag 0003, 0010 to put certain sections of exe into the DICOM file. I'll tell you the logic, don't worry. Let's first experience the magic and then we'll go through the logic. So I put certain portion of portable exe into the 310 tag, okay? So basically this tool takes 3 arguments: exe, legitimate DICOM, and the path where the resultant DICOM has to be stored, okay? So let's move to the third one. Now let's try to run this tool. So a simple Python command does it. And here you can see a resultant DICOM file has been created. So this is the same file which we have just opened in the DICOM viewer a bit back, okay? So it's over here in the result folder. Now let's move to the interesting part. I've navigated into the location where we've just created the file which has been infiltrated. Cool. So get ready. So result dicom.dcm is the name, right? So boom, I just press enter after this, and you see it has printed a string. But this is a DICOM file, and it is being interpreted as an executable and not like a DICOM file. Now let's see. I'm trying to open the executable using PS Studio. I'm trying to open the infiltrated file in a PS Studio, and as you can see, it is being interpreted as an executable over here. Cool. But when you try to open the same file in a DICOM viewer, it is also a DICOM. So in the sense, it is at the same time, at a given time, it is both a DICOM file and also an executable. So now let's go into the logic behind it.
That was done, right?
Cool. So infiltrating DICOMs. This one which you see on the left side is how an exe looks like. The center one is the DICOM file, and the one which is towards the extreme right is the file, resulting file which we get when we run the script. Okay. So in the exe file, there are sections called DOS header and DOS stub, and there is a certain pointer called elfaneu, which tries to point from the DOS header to the PE header. The reason is, if you observe, the DOS stub is of variable size, right? So for the DOS header to understand the size of DOS stub, there will be a pointer pointing from DOS header to PE header, so that the difference between that location and the PE header will give the size of DOS stub. Got it? So what we do is, we put this DOS header and DOS stub into the preamble section of DICOM over there. So the DOS header and DOS stub goes over there. And the remaining part of exe, we'll try to create a new private tag and we'll insert it over there. All the data in form of bytes, we'll insert it as a private tag. Now, we'll update the elfaneu pointer, which is pointing from the DOS header to P header, which was previously something else. We'll update the value to the newer one, which is over here. Right? And post that, there are certain things which need to be done. P header has, the size of header has increased because there are certain data elements which are above the private tag. So we need to update the length of the file header and point it to the raw data, file alignment. Most of you know what file alignment is, right? So exes have to be broken into certain sizes in order to go into the paging memory. So all those things have to be updated at byte level. So all that is being done by the script which I have written. So the good part is, DICOM readers don't care about what is there in the preamble and what is there in the private tags. So they just ignore what is there, the information which is there in the preamble and the private tags. And as you know, exes directly jump to the P header from the DOS header without not caring at all about the stuff which is in between. So in that sense, it is trying to fool both the exe interpreter and also the DICOM header. So that's the logic. And moving on, I'll hand it over to Shyam, who will explain you the future scope of attacks, which can be done by exploiting this design flaw in the DICOM files. Over to Shyam.
Hey, thanks, Rakesh. So now he showed you guys about how he embedded the exe into the DICOM, right? Now this is when I come to the party here, right? I just love cyber attacks, and especially have a long-standing relationship with Windows, because you can exploit it so much, it keeps giving you. So welcome to the exploit part of things in Windows. And what's the beauty of the whole DICOM thing is, as he mentioned, it's got a dual tone to it. It acts like an exe, but technically when you open it, it looks like a DICOM file. If you upload any of these DICOM files that you've infected into an antivirus vendor like VirusTotal or anybody, right? They will probably tag it as these two things you see on the screen, right? It is an exe and it is a DICOM image. So technically, the way it shows as a magic byte, it's a DICOM image which absolutely bypasses every antivirus vendor. So isn't that the real deal, right? Your first line of defense is breached here. Now, technically, sandboxes cannot detect it either, because they'll run it, they'll open it, they'll see the network connections, and boom, they're done. Now, this is where we come to the party here. Here are the list of attacks you can probably do, and I'm going to show a couple of things that I've worked on. One, steganography. The AV evasions we already showed you. There's nothing more to explain in that. Command and control callbacks. How many of you know what is a command and control? You guys have watched Independence Day? The mail-in shippers be there, right? And small ships. That's basically a command and control server. All these small pawns will do the job for you, and they go report it back to the mothership. Something like Thanos, right? He doesn't come for the stone, somebody else comes for that. And then finally, my favorite topic, process injections. I'm going to talk more on process injections, but there was a lot of research done on this. I'm not going to cover this section which talks about hiding malware or data into an image is called as steganography. You have a lot of steganographic techniques which was used during the World War times to transfer secret information. But there are a lot of attacks and techniques like distortion, vector embedding, spread spectrum, which we're probably not going to talk about. We are going to talk about the most interesting topic, injection. Okay? Now, what exactly is injection? So, injection is turning a good process into a bad process. Can somebody find a flaw of the slide that I've put up there? Anybody? That's the beauty of process injection. The spelling of because is actually wrong there. Okay? Which means it turns a good sentence into a bad sentence and a good process into a bad process. Let's take a small example, right? In Windows, there's a logic and there's something called as APIs. These two things are really, really useful for you. When you use Windows, you create a file, delete a file, connect to the internet, and do a bunch of things. Everything talks to the kernel through the API. Suppose you're creating a process, it says create process. Suppose there's a list of process that's running, it rules something called as create tool 32 snapshot. Okay? There are a lot of ways to do it. Delete a process, write a process. So what I'm going to do here is take a good process and convert that into a bad process. Okay? Which means the bad process using Windows API is going to go to the good process and say, dude, can you just give me a small space where I can just park myself here? All thanks to Windows' debugging technique. Technically, a process can talk to another process and its memory in Windows. Now, keep this in your mind. We have the DICOM, which is usually opened and viewed in hospitals using a DICOM viewer, which runs on Windows. And sadly, some of the places it runs on Windows 7. Technically, it still is a pirated version. So it's all the more fun, right? I mean, Windows and not privacy, piracy go very hand in hand, to be honest. So what this malicious DICOM does is, it says, hey, I actually know you are the DICOM viewer, can you just give me a small space in your process? So it writes its bad section of the code into a running process and turns that into bad. Now this is the attack that we call as process injection on Windows, which justifies the talk that I'm going to take control of the entire hospital. And honey, we just take control of the entire hospital. Now, the reason is the DICOM files keep moving around in the hospital. Various doctors, second opinion, third opinion. You want to do multiple billings. If you see the insurance value is more, you do more billings. All of these things are there, right? It keeps moving around. Now, this is easy in Windows, but unfortunately in Linux, it's pretty hard to do it because there's no APIs like the way it has in Windows. So you'll have to use something called as ptrace, which looks for the process, attaches itself to a process, and then it does something called as LD_preload or a library-based injection attacks. Memory is a problem for most of us, but just try to remember this. Do you remember seeing this image in my first slide? Which was showing what? X-ray. Now, did you see the genie there? That is basically the injected process. So we converted the DICOM reader using process injection into a bad process which keeps running, can talk to the command and control server and download additional malware and do lateral movement in the network. Now, some of these hospital systems usually do not have programming languages. What if I told you that I can push a small interpreter, which is a Python, using process injection into a running process? The Hulk smash way. Okay? Now you can push, there are sample codes in the internet that you can see that using Python packages, you can push a Python interpreter into a running process. There's a stock code available in the internet. You can take a look at it. Now there, I'm having privileges to run a malicious process or a piece of code by not even having a privilege to run it. Again, a classic example of process injection. The reason is the DICOM viewer runs on a privileged mode and you're inheriting the privilege of the DICOM viewer. Classic process injection. And the last but not the least, like you probably use, how many of you watch He-Man here? Awesome. You made my day, guys. Thank you. So, the sword is actually unlimited power, and especially if you use a PowerShell, it's a Windows utility to administrative computers remotely. You can also embed a PowerShell script inside this DICOM and execute it, and it calls without being logged. So, let's get to the defense, the last set of slides. What if I told you the first line of defense is actually attack, which is what we did? And welcome to the world of thermodynamics. I'm not going to bore you, don't worry. What's that on the screen? Stupid question. Who wasn't part of the party yesterday? Okay, you would have seen this, right? Okay. Now, what you see on the screen is an ice cube. The state of the ice cube remains constant. There's no change in that. What if the ice cube melts? There's a lot of randomness in it. This is entropy in thermodynamics. We're going to use the same concept here to stop such malicious DICOMs from entering the hospital. And Rakesh is probably going to talk about it, how we've built a solution around it, and we've stopped such attacks in hospitals and in DICOM environments. Over to you, Rakesh.
Thank you, Shyam. So Shyam has given you a perspective of what entropy is from the thermodynamics perspective. But what is Shannon's entropy when you look at it from an information theory perspective? How many of you here know conditional probability? Like given a certain string, you have to predict what's the next string is going to be, right? So entropy is just a measure of how accurately you can predict what is going to come, given that you have some data already with you. So it just measures the amount of randomness in a given data. As you know, the threat actors usually inject a lot of stuff which is completely obfuscated. It's quite hard to interpret, right? So it's completely random. So such randomness can be figured out using the metric called entropy. Another advantage, can you move forward? Yeah. So why entropy? You have any idea why entropy? Why we chose entropy? Any guesses? So unlike JPEG, PNG files, which can be as small as KB in kilobytes, DICOM files are not small. They can go till GBs, 10s and 20s of GBs, right? So if you choose heavy processes like machine learning, inferences and other things to figure out whether a DICOM is malicious or not, that's going to hit your performance very badly. So we decided to go with a static analysis technique of using entropy as a metric to figure out malicious stuff in the preamble section of the DICOM file. We've improved that and we've decided to look only certain sections of the DICOM file, DICOM preamble. So that has been filed for a patent with the company, which I can't reveal, but I'll tell you, there are certain, limitations to the technique of using entropy as well. First thing is just say I fake my name as a script tag with an alert message. And I've uploaded the DICOM onto a web browser and someone opens it. And if that browser is running an older version which doesn't have XSS protection, then boom, hospital is gone. And unfortunately, DICOM currently doesn't have any restrictions on the stuff that can go into the standard tags like patient name and other things. So there is also a need to, filter out malicious strings in the public tags as well. Another thing is not just the Windows scripts, you can put certain Linux commands like nc calls and other things into the preamble section. 128 bytes is huge, dude. You can put a lot of Linux scripts into that particular section of the DICOM file. So all these things will go under the hood when you use entropy. So that's the reason why we decided to go with another layer of security, which is using Yara. How many of you here know what Yara is? So yeah, Yara is a tool which helps you to find patterns based on regular expressions. You know regular expressions, right? So you can give certain regular expressions. You can write certain rules so that a traffic or a file which has patterns which are matching with a given rule will be blocked. For example, this is a simple rule. There are complex rules as well. I've just put this for the sake of demo. So this particular rule tries to block the script tags and image tags in the entire DICOM file. Cool. So what we offer to the product teams is, we offer two methods to scan a given file. The first one is the quick scan. because some modalities have very strict restrictions on the time they can spend on scanning a DICOM file. So quick scan, what it does is, it quickly looks through the 128-byte preambles of the given DICOM dataset, and they just give you a heat map if there is any abnormal stuff in the DICOM preamble. But as I said, quick scan is not that effective at finding the deeper sections of scanning the deeper sections of the DICOM file, right? So we've also provided another version of aggressive scan, which uses both Yara and Shannon's entropy. This is a bit slower than the Shannon's entropy, but it's not that bad, which will end up affecting the performance. So the modalities which can afford aggressive scan, they can go for an aggressive scan. There's also another version where only the quick scan will be performed, and if there is any malicious stuff, only then if there is any flagging stuff, if there is something that has been flagged by the quick scan, only then it will proceed to the aggressive scan. So these three things we have offered to the product teams, and it's currently with GE Healthcare. So that's all we have.
I'll probably add one thing. So why we chose entropy is one of the main reasons is, see, threat actors and malwares, when they try too much, right? Too much of hiding, too much of obfuscation and encryption, it usually sticks out. If you take a good file, right? There's something called as malspam. Malwares come in emails, in PDF attachments, and Word documents in form of invoices and insurance. If you see a good Word document or a good PDF has an entropy score close to 4, for example. Now, what if this example you saw, right? The preamble, we are injecting data. Now, what if I inject a JavaScript inside a PDF, which is a rich media format, and if I inject an exe inside it, it sticks out. So the randomness will move up by 1.5 notches. When you calculate Shannon's entropy theory, it will shoot close to 6. So this is an effective way of giving a verdict to a file and sections where we cannot talk about our patent here. And one of the main reasons we chose entropy was it was actually easy to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I would probably not thank you, but I will also thank you for taking your time off and listening to our talk. It is indeed an honor for me and Rakesh to be a part of Nullcon. Make the most out of it. It's one of the best places you could find. And then I hope Nullcon transfers that advertising money back to my account. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are open for questions. So
yeah, we are up for questions, guys. Go for it.
Anyone question?
I think the two good questions will get an iPhone 10, right? For the lucky draw.
Yeah.
All right.
Sponsored by him.
What I just did was social engineering, so.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Great talk.
Thanks, man.
So the question is, how do you basically get the initial machine? How do you push the DICOM? How do you modify all these things initially? So, you explained that you're going to put the payload, you're going to modify the PE bytes and everything. But where do you do this from? Or as the malicious attacker, how does he come in first to get access to this DICOM protocol?
You want to take it? Go ahead.
I'll try to explain that. What you asked is valid. So the challenge is to put this DICOM into the hospital network, right? But unfortunately, most of the hospitals are going cloud, and many of the services are currently sitting, the PAX server which I have just shown you is sitting in the cloud. So if there is any glitch in that particular cloud endpoints, if something is leaking over there, and if it goes into the PAX, then it can easily spread across. So there should be some kind of barrier in the PAX itself which tries to stop the DICOM files. You're right, the challenge is to put this DICOM into the hospital network. But the one unfortunate thing in hospitals and healthcare industry is that most of the attacks are internal. So more than 70% of the attacks that healthcare industry is seeing is due to the internal actors. So if they have access to the system and they can simply upload an exe into a PAX, then boom, it's over. So did I answer the question?
I'll probably add to Rakesh's thing. Thanks, Rakesh. Now, technically, you see malspam, the way it spreads, right? Malware plus spam in form of Word document or PDF, right? Email is always the first vector. If you see most of the cyber attacks, 75% of the percentage of cyber attacks spread via email with a Word document, macros. Those are probably targeted towards shipping companies, insurance companies, and a lot of these things. Now, similarly, email is another attack vector in this case. Let's take an example saying that somebody sends a email to the doctor, right? Everybody is there, information is available, saying that, please take a look at this X-ray, you asked me to come back again. What they go back to the hospital and open the email, which is actually an infected DICOM. So email is one of our primary vectors here, and apart from what Rakesh mentioned was internal attacks, internal threat actors or APTs, it can be anybody. But we've kept this as the inspiration in our mind, and then that's when we asked this question.
Yep, thanks. Actually, the initial vector is over an email or something.
Yep.
You get access to that machine, and then that's where you get into the hospital's DICOM and stuff like that.
Yep.
But the other question comes over here is, you guys do any work on HL7 protocol as well?
Sorry, what was that?
HL7. Yeah.
So we are exploring that protocol. We are just currently working on DICOM files. And as you said, we are parallelly doing research on whether HL7 protocols are vulnerable or not. And also we are trying to see if we can automate the execution of DICOM files. Like when a physician tries to open it in industry standard DICOM viewers like Radiant, Micron, we are trying to see if we can find certain sections in that particular viewer which are getting executed so that our code will try to call it. So as of now, these two researches is going on parallelly. As you said, HL7 format is currently, we are researching on it.
And the DICOM files, when it gets dropped on the PAC server, so I think the malware is going to get executed on the doctor's computer or whoever is getting open it.
Correct. It's on the client side.
On the client side.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the sanitization point where we want to put the solution so that if the PAC servers, wherever it's saving and moving, we would want to calculate the value of the file and to see how sane the file is before we store it. So it's going to run pretty much everywhere and in defense in depth matters. So
thank you.
Hey, thanks, man, for the questions. Nice. Yep, we have another question. One more there.
So my question to you, great talk.
Thanks, man.
So typically this DICOM images of the files, a radiologist has to, as a part of the training and everything, they usually analyze this, right? So number one question is that what stops from a malicious attacker like you uploading this malicious thing into open web where you are uploading this and just keeping that ready, weaponized, and these guys, as part of the training, they just do that. So how do we prevent that?
So that's actually a good question, right? So that's again boils down to that point saying that when we download open source software, is it verified or not, right? Sometimes this can be fatal when they say data sets are available for AI ML, right? So when we also was doing the research, we found some free DICOM images in the internet, which could be a weaponized thing also. But that the antivirus AV vendors or see, the problem is whenever somebody uploads something for free, then it's an issue. You're the commodity when it's free. Maybe that's a good question. We'll probably take that into a consideration, but I don't think that there's no control on that for such weaponized payloads that's available in the internet. So.
Okay. The next question I have is, typically this DICOM images, as you said rightly, is pretty huge. In terms of the size. Let's take an example of T1W axial image of the brain. Let's take an example of T1W axial image of a brain. So the brain scan would consist of 50% of black pixels, right? So the person who's reading that is just looking into the scan and just seeing that, okay, this is what. So there comes a time when it becomes very difficult for an organization to keep storing these images as part of the compliance or whatever. So they tend to go into compressing this. So if you compress this, I don't know how your payload is going to get affected or the headers are going to get affected. So can you throw some light on that?
We've tried that, and when you try to compress it, it's not getting changed. I mean, when it is decompressed again, it's the same file again. So preamble is not basically getting compressed. That's the issue. And one more thing to add here is like the gentleman who asked the question previously, I mean like how you can get a DICOM file into a system. By the way, I've downloaded the test DICOM from the open source website, which is lying outside in the web. If I upload my malicious stuff on a web server and host it somewhere, some guy sitting in some other healthcare company will download it and boom, that's the issue. That's how you can get into the systems. That's true.
Exactly. So we've moved away from the fact where we used to take these burned DVDs and CDs with these medical images when they put it. Now today USB, that's another attack vector. I think we speak for 5 more minutes. We'll have 4 more patents after this, I guess.
And just one more thing I wanted to add here is like, whoever is from the healthcare industry, they know what Quido, Vado, and Stow protocols are, right? So one thing to note here is like C-store, C-move, those things, they usually won't transfer the preamble section of the DICOM file. So those are the things those are the protocols which are used only to transfer data between a device to device. But when it comes to the web-based packs, it uses Quido, Vado, and Stow. So these protocols will transfer the preamble section of the file as well. So these protocols are indeed vulnerable to the attack which we've just shown you.
So hi guys, great talk.
Thank you.
I have a question which is related to finding this vulnerability. So my question is, as you mentioned that this DICOM header has this preamble, and the intention of this particular header is to actually put in the GPG or other forms of header in there, and the reader is actually ignoring it. So why there is a gap between the protocol and the reader, the companies who are writing the reader? So how because of the protocol has not evolved, or the readers are all not in line with the protocol?
Protocol hasn't evolved much. That's the issue. And as you said, you have a valid point. The third-party viewers, which help you view TIFF files and DICOM files, they can add a functionality which even looks at the preamble file and sees if it's malicious or not. That can be done. Yeah.
This restricts the solution to few of the readers, or all the readers in the market are actually
we've taken the leading DICOM viewers which are used, which is Radiant Viewer and Micron Viewer. So these are there in almost all the hospitals across the world. So you can imagine.
Thank you.
If there's no more questions, I think we are done. Thank you so much, guys, again. Have a good Nullcon.